each AWS account. You can log into either directly, or if you are an IAM user, a sub-user, you have to go to that specific account to log in. Now, let's see. I have a multi-factor authentication application running, so I have to do multi-factor auth for that account. Doesn't matter that people can see this because it will just expire later. At least I think so. Okay. So there's a lot of different AWS services. What I'm going to talk about is RDS, which is their relational database service. Basically, a database as a service. Several nice features they have are being able to snapshot and their high availability instances. So RDS has several different options of databases you can run, from MySQL and Postgres to SQL Server and different Oracle ones. And so let's walk through launching an instance. You get to choose which kind of type or engine you want to run. I'll go through bringing up the Postgres one. Kind of the first decision you need to make is if you want a multi-availability zone one. And what this does is, behind the scenes, it runs two instances of your database. And if the one fails for whatever reason, it will fail over to the other backup one. The instances are in two separate availability zones, so that kind of for redundancy purposes, if there are problems with one availability zone, there are hopefully not problems in the other availability zone. Provisioned IOPS is kind of a tiered layer for paying for more performant disks. They now offer like SSDs and stuff for use in these database applications. So we'll choose production for this at this point. And then you get to choose the engine version, what type you want for the instance. If you're ever unsure, mediums are a good one to go with. Good one to start with, and then test as far as the application goes and go from there.
So any idea what this ends up costing, Bowen?
Yes, you can use the calculator to kind of calculate stuff. So this calculator lets you look at the various services, and you can add kind of the various types of services and just see what stuff's going to cost. So let's say we did choose medium, and I'll highlight kind of these different types here in a moment. So it can be anywhere from like $60, $80 a month for a really decent server. Let's go with the multi-availability zone. Since it's running two instances, the multi-availability zone does kind of basically double your bill. But I think it's worth it in a production environment because of the kind of uptime not necessarily guarantees, but just help that it gives, and makes it a lot easier to manage than a lot more transparent to manage than having your own kind of failover and management and stuff like that.
Have you ever tried running it with a micro? Just curious, because the micros are really cheap, but fairly limited.
I have never in a real application.
Okay.
Just for testing out and trying different things. So I would never use a micro in anything beyond a toy because of the burst. So it has a very low amount of CPU kind of guaranteed, and then you're allowed to burst. But there's multiple times, even with toy applications, that if you're trying to build something or do run multiple at the same time, something will either get killed or throttled because you've exceeded your kind of burstable limit. Now that they've started extending that to all of their instances, or most of their instances types, in that they have a certain number of guaranteed CPUs, and then you can build up credits over time for more burstable applications, or times when you kind of burst above, and that can help kind of keep costs lower with something that maybe most of the time is fairly static, and every once in a while it just goes up. So you don't have to maybe provision for a higher load. And there's a graph there in the management console of the instances that can tell you about how much credits you've accrued and stuff.
Okay.
Looking at the calculator, some of the things you take into account are how much is this utilized, like things could be scaled up and down. And then just the engine type, which Postgres and MySQL being open source are don't require licenses, but the other types do. And you can either build that cost into what you provision or you bring your own license. There are the different types. And as you'll notice of instances, there's the kind of T1, T2, M3, R3. Those are talking about some are geared more towards memory and others are geared more towards processing power. So some might have more RAM and others might have more CPUs depending on what you need. If you're going to be doing a lot more processing of data versus just needing to crunch a whole large amount of data at one time. And the different types of storage, if you want to say back it by actual spinning disks versus general SSDs or provisioned IOPS, which is saying you're guaranteed to have a certain available amount of kind of bandwidth and for the amount of data that's going to come through. There's also the difference between on-demand and reserved instances. So if you're going to be running an instance for over a year or more, then reserved instances are a cheaper way to go. So the reserved instances, you pay a certain amount up front, and then you get a cheaper per month cost on running the instance. And there are different terms based on how much you're going to utilize it. So maybe you're going to be using a server nightly, maybe over a year. And so you choose like light utilization. Heavy utilization is this is always running. And then there's 1 year and 3 year terms. 3 year, of course, is cheaper, amortized cost over the 3 years, but you have to know that you're going to be using it for years. So we go back and we'll choose the micro. Let's see. I didn't get any creating a VPC, but I guess let's just go ahead and S. Say general purpose, and we'll say like 5 gigs. You should be more than fine with 5 gigs of storage space to start out with. And this is one of the advantages of the multi-availability zone, is that if you need to expand this, what you'll do is you'll go and you modify your instance, and you'll say, I need 20 gigs. And what will happen is they will upgrade the backup instance. So they will take it down, upgrade it to 20 gigs, sync it back up, then they will fail over from the current running instance to the new instance, shut down that old one, bring it up to 20 gigs, resync them, and then you've upgraded it without any downtime. The same would go for if you want to change the instance type class, the basic instance that's backing this, is you'd upgrade it, and if it's multi-availability zone, it will upgrade the fail over, upgrade the old one, you'll be running again. And now you need to choose identifiers. Master username. And then a password. And they do have some defaults, or some, has to be at least 2 characters. Since I'm going to create this and then
did you talk about what the VPC is up above?
Okay, so a VPC is probably something I should do in another session.
Okay.
It's basically a virtual private cloud. It allows you to isolate your resources from AWS proper into their own subnet, into their own stuff. Can only talk to it if you set up routable addresses, and you set up, and stuff can only talk to the outside world if you set up outside gateways and stuff. All new accounts have a default VPC built in now. And it's just a kind of a way to further segregate and isolate resources from not only the outside world, but from just other resources on AWS. So right now in this account, because it's an older type account, when we launch resources, they are open to the rest of AWS internally, but VPCs let you kind of segregate and isolate resources and control how they're accessed, even more than just as allowed by security groups.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, I should do a training. So that's a fairly, unless you're getting into it, that's probably about all you really need to know. So just because it dives down to the low level routing. While we're waiting for this, I can mention that to access the new, I was going to mention about elastic IPs. So elastic IPs are IPs that can be attached to an instance, and you can take that IP disassociated from an instance, in which case it will be assigned a new AWS IP, and then take that IP and attach it to another instance. That allows you to fail over, support with clients. but since the IP stays the same, accessing the new instance is using the same credentials and stuff that you were accessing the old instance with. I'm not sure why this is taking so long.
So then, after this is done launching, you won't be able to access this database from the outside world because of the VPC. Is that correct?
Yes. You would need. I have to check for sure by defaults, but by default, I believe it will launch into the VPC, and it will only be accessed by resources in that VPC unless you explicitly made it and have bridged it to other VPCs or the outside world. Okay. And so you have several tiers of instances. You have the RDS instances for service that's running in this VPC, and then you have the web servers that have a gateway saying route traffic to just these instances, but then the web instances can talk back to the database instance because they're the same in the same VPC. And you can set up routes between VPCs if you want to, and some other crazy stuff like that. So,
okay.
Once an instance is launched, it will show up here. One of the advanced options that I wanted to highlight was that it will allow you to set maintenance windows, and then you can set the security groups, and you can say set which instances are able to talk to it in the same security group. And it's easiest if you rather than have specific instances, that you have rules based on security groups. So you have a security group for each instances, and you have a security group for your database. And you give access. What you say is you add a rule in the RDS instance security group that says, I allow any instance in the web server or the app server security group to talk to me. And so that way, any instance that's launched into that security group can access it without you having to continually change or update the config.